Hello and welcome to Spardha Lines, your one-stop destination for civil services exam preparation, KPSC, UPSC and other relevant state-level examination preparation. Let's get started and try and understand some of the important articles that have been in news and can be very important from the examination point of view. Let's look into the first article. The first article is speaking about the Bulldoze of Politics and the Bulldoze of Justice. Let us try and understand what is this concept of bulldozer justice. Let us assume for a moment there is an individual, or let us assume for a moment there are a group of people. This individual or a group of people may have committed an illegal act, or they might have been a rioters. So what should ideally happen? If there is an individual who has committed an illegal act, or there is an individual or a group of people who might have committed a riot, what should ideally happen? There should be a rule of law and procedures prescribed in law that has to be followed by the state. When I state, the government of the day. So the state here basically means the government of the day will have to follow a certain rules and procedures that are already prescribed, and ultimately punishment will have to be imposed on such people. But instead of following such processes and the rule of law, there are a couple of states in India. This is where the author takes into picture the examples of Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Haryana, so on and so forth, where these individuals, that is, when they commit certain illegal act, their houses are destroyed, making use of the bulldozers. So basically these people could have been thrown behind bars, these people could have committed an illegal act, these people could have committed something heinous as well, but whatever is the procedure that has been established by law, that has to be taken into concurrence, and ultimately these people will have to be penalized for it. But instead of following the rule of law, what we are following is bulldozer politics, bulldozer justice, where their houses are destroyed immediately. And what are the reasons given by the government? The government has couple of reasons that it goes on to give. Let's say there is an individual who has committed an illegal act. This person and a group of people are the rioters in a particular case. So what is that the government is saying? The government is going on to say that these are the people who have committed heinous offences, and as a result their houses are constructed on the illegal structures, their houses are illegal structures, and their houses are consolidated and are built on the encroached area. They have encroached an area which they are ideally not supposed to, since they have constructed illegal structures and they are in encroachment. Their houses will be destroyed. Ideally, even if it is an illegal structure, what should happen? There has to be a notice that is sent to that particular person. What we have is a clear-cut guidelines given by the courts in India. When a particular body exercising the authority in that particular area, which is involved, let's say for example we have the BBMP in Karnataka, in Bangalore, so on and so forth. So you would have the authorities who would take care of that particular city and the corporation. This city authority or the town authority will have to send a notice. Notice as to what? This particular notice will have the details as to the violations that they have committed, and if this violation is committed, they have to be summoned. They have to be called before the authority. This authority will have to question that particular person as to why they have considered or constructed this illegal structure. Only after them giving due notice to them, asking their response as well, that is when procedures will have to be initiated in case illegal structure is to be destroyed. But in this particular case, notices have been issued, but some have been backdated as well. Some have been notices that have been issued in the morning and the illegal structures are destroyed in the evening. These have been the issues that have been persisting, says the author. So basically, if there are a certain section of individuals or the community people, they have their houses have been destroyed primarily because the government is of the view that they are illegal structures or the encroachment. And at the same time, the government also feels that these people will have to be taught a lesson to the alleged rioters. Yes, we have the prescribed set of laws. Despite having prescribed set of laws, it is not the prescribed set of laws that are followed, but instead it is the government which is wanting to teach a lesson, and ultimately the government is violating its own laws and orders. So the author goes on to say This is creating a problem. Why a problem? That is because the state is acting as the lawbreaker. How is the state acting as the lawbreaker? We have something called as the principles of constitutionalism. What is this constitutionalism? What is constitutional? Constitution is basically a written document. It has so many articles, it has so many clauses within it. So what it prescribes is a certain order that has to be followed. When constitution is written, we have the fundamental rights and we also have the directive principles of the state policy. What is the directive principle of the state policy? It has a positive connotation, which basically means that the state will have to do this, the state will have to do that, the state will have to bring economic justice, the state will have to bring social justice, the state will have to provide economic justice, the state can bring about uniform civil code, so the state will have to take care of the environment. So it is asking the state to perform certain activities, which is why it is called as a positive connotation. But when it comes to the fundamental rights, it is negative connotation, which means to say that the state should not do so and so, that the state should not be acting in a particular way. So when we say constitutionalism, we have the constitution, which is nothing but the bare act, which is the principles of the constitution, but within the principles of the constitution, the state will also have to restrict itself. When I say the state will also have to restrict itself, it is also bound by the principles of the constitution. It cannot violate the constitution, it cannot supersede the constitution, it cannot go beyond the contours of the constitution. That is what is called as constitutionalism. So the constitution per se is just a bare act, it is just a document, it is just a wordings that are written in a book, but how do we implement it? That is what is constitutionalism. So as much as I have to follow the constitution, you have to follow the constitution, someone else has to follow the constitution, the state is also bound to follow the constitutionalism, which means that they are within the contours of the constitution, they cannot exceed this particular boundary. That is what is called as constitution. So in this particular place, what the author is trying to say is that if there is a procedure that has been prescribed, that notices have to be sent, due process will have to be followed, natural justice principle have to be followed, the other side of the person will also have to be heard. This is not followed in couple of cases, and as a result, the state, which has to be a law framer, law follower, is the lawbreaker in this particular case, and that is the major concern, says the author. The state, that is the government, is also of the view that if we do not go about destroying these houses, which are illegal structures or encroachments, it also feels that we have to teach a lesson. Why is it doing that? That is because the government and few authorities, it is only few authorities mind you, they basically feel that the criminal justice system is grind on for years without results. What do I mean by it? This means that there are large number of cases in the judicial system, and it also takes a large number of years for these cases to be ultimately decided. When it takes large number of years to be decided, it also means justice delayed is justice denied as well. So they want quick justice, and this quick justice is what they are trying to provide through these means and mechanisms. Added to it, there is also a thing in law that a person need not be sent to jail until and unless it is proven. Law says that jail is an exemption and bail is the norm. So whenever you go knock the doors of the court in a very liberal way will also give him bail as well, looking at the previous criminal precedent, so on and so forth. So this, according to few authorities, is also wrong, primarily saying that the criminal justice system will take large number of years to decide a particular case, and at the same time it also means when there is a person who's committed a riot or a person who's committed an illegal act, he is also getting bail as well. So where is the concept of justice here is what few authorities are trying to question, and as a result the state feels, that is the government and few authorities feels, that we have to remove the illegal structures and encroachments, teach a lesson to the alleged rioters, since the criminal justice system has a lot of delay in it, which is why we are going with what is called as bulldozer justice, and we are providing instant justice, and ultimately it would act as a deterrent, is the viewpoint or the perspective of the state. But this is where there are a couple of concerns. We did discuss that the state is acting as the lawbreaker, it is violating its own principles of the constitutionalism that exists. Added to it, there is what is called as the procedure prescribed by the courts. What have the courts said? Whenever we speak about the court proceedings, what would happen? There has to be a notice that is sent. As I discussed, a notice is a format which says that you have violated so and so laws, you have to be summoned as well, you have to be heard as well, and all the procedures that have been prescribed have to be followed. But in number of cases, this is not being followed, and those people whose houses have also been destroyed are economically poor, from the poor sections. These are the people who do not have the houses. These are the people who have the houses after a large number of years. They have built it through their hard-earned money as well. These are the marginalized and economic community. Why are their houses getting destroyed? Why is there an illegal structure? Why is there an encroachment? That is also because the author goes on to say, this is not my perspective or our YouTube channel's perspective, but it is the author's perspective, who goes on to say that the state has failed in performing its obligations. There is state obligation failure. What do you mean by it? The state is supposed to take care, and it is the responsibility of the state to take care of the economic prosperity of the people. It has to provide rehabilitation schemes as well. Let's say, for example, if there is a particular person whose house has been destroyed, he has to be moved to another place, which is the rehabilitation scheme. That is not being done in couple of cases in India. And at the same time, when rehabilitation is provided, let's say, for example, a person is in place A. This person who is in place A is now being shifted to place B. This person in place A would have had the economic opportunities. He would be able to live a life of dignity in that particular place because he is built in that particular place a source of income. Now if he is moving to another place B, there might not be economic opportunities. So if the state is moving him to place B, this would also mean he is losing out on the economic terms. So it is not just the rehabilitation, but the other sources of income will also have to be heard. So in this particular case, the author goes on to say this has also not been met by the state. This is the second concern. The third is with respect to notice. Whenever we speak about notice, it has to be sent on a particular date to that person. This notice will be received by that particular person, and next legal course of action will be taken up by that particular person. But what have authorities done? I would have sent a notice from my authority, that is from my organization, from my office today, that is 11th of August 2023. But what would I do? I would backdate it. Let's say I am keeping the date as July 11th. So instead of sending this date's notice, I would have sent it backdated, so 1 month prior to it. So it looks like the authorities have sent this particular notice prior to this particular auction or prior to this particular demolition. But unfortunately, this is all a lie and a treachery, says the author. Added to it, there are ample number of cases where they would have sent the notice today and they would have destroyed this particular building today. So where is the question of natural justice and hearing the other party? And at the same time, whenever we speak about criminal precedents, or we speak about an illegal act committed by a person, if I have committed an illegal act today, it is only me who will have to be punished. But what happens if the house of that particular individual is destroyed? There are other family members of that house as well. If there is an individual's house destroyed, the other family members will also be harmed as well. This is not the right principles of criminal jurisprudence, says the author. So the author goes on to say that if the guilty are not proved guilty, it is just an accusation that is made against this person. So only after all the charges are proved, only when he is held guilty, that is when penal provisions should be imposed on this particular person, because he is violating the rule of law. But in this particular case, we are imposing with penalty, we are imposing with punishment by destroying his house, and ultimately we are violating the rule of law before even making sure that the person is held guilty, says the author. So what is the author saying as a source of way forward? he goes on to say that it is for the courts to interpret, make sure that they enforce the rule of law and the principles of constitution, and ultimately whosoever is there, they have to be brought to the task books, says the author. So basically he is requesting the courts to act as a vigilant body, make sure that rule of law is implemented, and ultimately the principles of constitutionalism is also taken into picture, says the author. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says India's Myanmar quandary, its paradoxical policy. The article here is speaking about what is happening in Myanmar currently, what needs to be done going forward. What is the present issue? We know for the fact that Myanmar has been in a lot of chaos. There is a large scale ruckus that is created in the scale of Myanmar. Why? That is because you had democracy that was established in Myanmar. We have Aung San Suu Kyi, who happened to establish democracy, but after like many months or even years, what happened? It is the military junta, which has taken over the rule of law, and the democracy which was installed in Myanmar was completely subjugated, and what we currently have is the rule of the military in Myanmar. So democracy was present. Democracy has been replaced currently with the military rule in Myanmar. Why did the military take over the reins of democracy, and now there is military coup that has taken place in Myanmar? What are the reasons given by it? There are a couple of reasons given by Myanmar military. What they go on to say is that whenever democracy has to be installed, what you have is an election process. But according to military junta, the election process that had taken place in Myanmar was with fraud. He says that there have been a lot of violations that have taken place. These violations installed democracy and its political parties. So they say that because there was fraud in Myanmar, that is why this democratically elected government had to be thrown out, and we have taken the position of the leaders in democracy, says the Myanmar military. And in the present situation, for the fourth time, what they have been able to do is extend the national emergency. So the article in this particular case goes on to say that there have been an extension of emergency for another 6 months, which is the violation of the 2008 constitution. So Myanmar had a constitution which was drafted by the military back in the year 2008. According to it, the constitution permits only 2 6-month extensions, and it requires authorities to hold elections within 6 months of a state of emergency being lifted. And now what we have is the fourth time that emergency is being imposed in the state of Myanmar. So the article goes on to say what we are witnessing right now is utmost disrespect to the constitution of Myanmar, and ultimately this constitutional principles is getting violated, says this article. This is one part of the story. The other part of the story is with respect to the release of several political prisoners and even reduce their sentences. Why has the Myanmar military done this? That is because they basically go on to feel that there have been a large scale impositions, sanctions that have been imposed by number of countries. Let's say for example, you have United States of America, or let's say for example, you have couple of Western countries. They have imposed international sanctions. Why? Because there was a military coup. Because there was a military coup, they have to ensure that this negative image is reduced. So what are they trying to do? On one side, they want to ensure that they are increasing the emergency, further extending the emergency, but at the same time, they also want to make sure they want to come out with a clean and clear image, which will not be happening, but this is their perspective about Myanmar. So in order to get a clean image, what they are trying to do in the present situation is bring these people out so that they are equating it that we are also treating democracy equally important. But do note, when it comes to Myanmar, the situation in Myanmar is not that easily. Why have they extended the emergency? That is because they feel that protests in Myanmar have been continuing. Authorities have also seized nearly 20,000 firearms and more than 1.4 million rounds of ammunition. So in order to keep a check on the internal turmoil in Myanmar, that is why emergency has been extended. So what are the two objectives of this particular issue? One, that military has extended the emergency, and at the same time while there is negative image that is attached to it, it also wanted to bring a positive transformation. So what is it doing? It is bringing this positive transformation basically by releasing the political prisoners and even reducing their sentences. So basically, as of now, they have imposed this emergency basically to delay the elections and to make sure that there are more military hardliners within the system, and all those supporting democracy and democratic principles are completely out of the system. So when this happens, there will be no viable opposition. So there will be no opposition political parties. Those who are wanting to support democracy, their imprint is not present in Myanmar parliament, and ultimately what Anna Suu Kyi has also demonstrated is that she is willing to compromise and work with the military, and as a result what they are trying to do is make sure that the clean and clear image is sent across the world so that other countries lift the sanctions and there is revival of the economic prospects. This is what the Myanmar government trying to push across. So when it comes to India and Myanmar relationship, the author further goes on to say that India is in a state of paradox, it is in a state of dilemma, it is in a state of confusion, and it is perplexed as well. Why? That is because we have issues right now which we are not able to decide on a proper basis. On one side, we are saying that we have to give importance to democracy in Myanmar, but at the same time, our policies are different as well. How? India is also supplying some of the military equipments since the coup happened to Myanmar. So we want to support democracy in Myanmar, but at the same time we are also supplying arms as well. The positive side to this is that we are not supposed to only look at the negative side, but why is India sending these arms to the military in Myanmar is also what needs to be taken into consideration. Why is India doing that? That is because there are a couple of infiltrations that happen from Myanmar. There are groups who want to establish sovereign parts within India. They want to take away certain parts of India. They want to establish an independent state. How are we going to destroy these insurgent groups? What we require is the cooperation of another country as well. These countries will also help India. So the negative image that is attached right now is India is only supplying arms, but why are we supplying arms is what also needs to be introspected, and that is where there are infiltration groups that are working along the border areas. To bring an end to it, India is also cooperating with Myanmar. So a positive image is what we also have to look at. Added to it, there is trafficking and drug smuggling in Myanmar. How are we going to control it? There is commitment to democracy in Myanmar is in contrast to our policy, and at the same time, while China is doing something in Myanmar, we are also trying to do similar things. India's announcement of Sairang railway station near the Myanmar border along India's Act East policy aim to counter China's railway access in Myanmar through Yunnan and the ambitious China-Myanmar economic corridor. What it clearly points out that we are competing with China, forgetting some of the basic principles that we have to follow. And at the same time, what needs to be done? India currently needs to engage with Suu Kyi. That is because her prison sentence has been reduced. So India, in order to promote democracy, we have to start interacting with her, and at the same time try possibly pushing democracy further, says the author. And at the same time, the government and the media must also avoid blanket securitization and profiling of the incoming refugees from Myanmar, says the author. If we are able to ensure that if democracy has to be installed, we have to keep speaking to democratically elected parties and resourceful people, and at the same time we should not be speaking ill and odd about the incoming refugees from Myanmar, says the author. If we are able to do this, rework on these criterion, we would be able to have a better relationship with Myanmar, says the author. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says doctors can choose not to treat unruly patients. Let us try and understand what is this article all about. There have been couple of cases in India where people have forgotten humanity. A person who gives life, a new life, happens to be a doctor. Yes, our mothers would have given life to us, but it is the doctors who give life a new life. They put in hard years working day in and day out, ultimately learning the procedures and nuances of medicine. And when they are not able to perform well, despite putting all their efforts, not performing well in terms of the people, but they would have put their heart and soul in order to make sure that a particular person is cured. But what would happen in some cases? There would be some unruly behavior for a few people who even hit the doctors as well. And in such cases where doctors are not happy with the patients, in such cases where there is unruly behavior, there is bad mouthing that happens in the hospital, what we have is the current authority, that is the National Medical Commission's Gazette notification, which has gone ahead and said, if there is such unruly behavior against the doctors, such patients need not be treated by the doctors. If there is unruly behavior, the patients and their people are not ready to reach out to the doctor and are not ready to discuss with the doctor in a very nice way. In such cases, the doctor may decline, but at the same time, he should also say that the so and so patient can be taken to a new hospital where treatment is provided. So such patients should be referred for further treatment elsewhere, but the doctors can avoid if there is unruly behavior, says this notification. And further, there is bar on doctors from endorsing any drug bans, medicine and equipment or advertising them. RMPs and their families must not receive any gift, travel facilities, hospitality, cash or monetary grants, consultancy fee or honorariums, or access to entertainment or recreation from the pharmaceutical companies. This is basically done in order to prevent these pharmaceutical companies from influencing the doctors. So a doctor may prescribe some of the cheapest drugs in the market, but when they have a tie-up with a pharmaceutical company, they start giving in prescription only these medicines. So they should not be able to advertise this particular medicine of a pharmaceutical company, and at the same time they should not be taking any of these offers for by the pharmaceutical company, says this article. However, this does not include salaries and benefits that RMPs may receive as employees of these organizations. RMPs should not be involved in any third-party educational activities like seminar, workshop, symposia, conference, etc., which involves direct or indirect sponsorship from the pharmaceutical companies. They should not be engaging in any of these seminars, so on and so forth. If it is the pharmaceutical company which is planning to come up with this conference and they are planning to influence the outcome, which is indirectly like advertisement, which is banned according to the latest notification. It also specified that the use of alcohol or other intoxicants during duty or off duty, which can affect professional practice, will be considered as misconduct. There have been movies like Kabir Singh, I mean no harm to any movies per se, but if the doctors go on to consume the alcohol and if they go on to perform the operations or any of the other things, that is banned under this particular list as well. The regulations added that reasonable estimation of the cost of the surgery or treatment should be provided to the patient to enable information. Consultation fees should be made known to the patient before examination or treatment of the patient. This basically means that even before the patient takes up the services of the doctor or the hospital, they should be aware as to how much they would be charged under this particular practice, because they should be able to pay that particular amount. If they are not able to, they should be able to know and refrain from doing it as earlier as possible. These are some of the rules that have been prescribed in the Gazette notification. This has been taken into picture, one, to protect the doctors and at the same time protect the patients as well. Now let's look into the next article. This article says government staff seek restoration of the old pension scheme. The article here is drawing a difference between old pension scheme and new pension scheme. So the new pension scheme has been in place after January 1, 2004, but much prior to that, what we have is the old pension scheme. What is this old pension scheme and why is that the government staff are seeking for the restoration of the old pension scheme? What happens in the new pension scheme? Let me give you a explanation. In new pension scheme, what happens? A certain percentage of a person's salary is taken out and equivalent amount is contributed by the government. Let's assume for a moment, for the sake of simplification, that 1 lakh is the salary of the employee. So let's say 10% out of it is taken, which is about 10,000. So 10,000 is taken out of a person's salary, and this 10,000 will be deposited in one of the funds, which will be managed by one of the stakeholders. Let's say, for example, it can be a mutual fund stakeholder, so on and so forth. So this 10,000 that is taken out, an equivalent amount of 10,000 would also be added by the government. So this 10,000 plus another 10,000, for the sake of simplification, will be put up in that particular account, and ultimately it will be given as pension after the years of retirement. So what would happen? A certain amount of money is taken out of the salary of an individual and a certain equivalent amount is contributed by the government. This gets added on and on every month, years after years, and ultimately this is what is given to the person as a pension. But what used to happen in the old pension scheme, there was no amount that was taken out of the person's salary, which means to say that this 10,000 or whatsoever is not taken. 1 lakh, if it is the salary, the same would be paid to that particular person. But what would be his pension? Let's say 1 lakh is the last drawn salary. So half of it would be given to the person, which is 50,000. Or let's say the person's salary, the last drawn salary happens to be 50,000. What would be the pension? The pension would be 25,000. Or let's say the person has last drawn salary, which is 2 lakhs. So half of it is 1 lakh. 1 lakh would be the pension that a person would be getting. When you consider the old pension scheme, what you would have is a particular amount that would be given to the person, which is half of the last drawn salary. So he would be getting a huge amount as pension. But when it comes to the new pension scheme, money is taken out of his salary, equivalent amount is also deposited, but this will not be close to the old pension scheme. And as a result, these employees now feel that they want old pension scheme but not new pension scheme. What is the advantage of the old pension scheme? One, the person's salary's amount is not taken out, that is an advantage, and at the same time he is also put in large number of years working for the government, and when it comes to the contribution made by him, the government is giving the salary and also pension after he is retired, and this pension would be 50% of the last drawn salary. But what is the disadvantage with it? Where does the government get the money? We already have a large scale fiscal deficit. So how are we going to contribute more as well if the government goes on giving it the pension in this particular old pension scheme? It is the government which could feel the heat of the budget, and as a result, what this article goes on to say is that the government people, the staff, are seeking for the old pension scheme and they do not want the new pension scheme, says this article. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. So this is it from our side. If you have liked our initiative, please do like the videos, share it with your fellow aspirants, and at the same time subscribe to our YouTube channel. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.